Queen Marin Solvin of the Aurelian crown stood beneath a ceiling of living crystal, dressed in black battle silk and a coronet sharp enough to cut light, while beyond the palace shield the city of Illyria screamed under falling fire. Her generals waited in a crescent of armored obedience. Nobles clutched prayer beads made from dead moons, and the royal choir kept singing because ancient law said music must not stop while the monarch still breathed. On the main display, blue towers collapsed into streets packed with civilians. Market bridges split, hospitals flickered red, schools flashed distress codes, and every emergency channel drowned in 1,000 voices asking why the palace gates were still closed. Queen Marin watched all of it with the cold face her tutors had carved into her since childhood. Because rulers did not weep where enemies could see, rulers chose, rulers preserved order. Rulers counted bodies after victory, not before it. Then Captain Elias Ward stepped away from the wall. He was not meant to speak. He was Earth liaison. Foreign officer, inconvenient ally. Useful because Earth's relief fleet had arrived 3 days before the attack, and politically impossible to dismiss. He wore a gray combat coat with burns along one sleeve. No jewels, no ceremonial blade. Only a small patch shaped like a blue planet and a white circle. He had spent most of the council sessions silent, watching maps, listening to casualty estimates, and staring at the sealed outer gates as if he could hear every fist striking them from 20 levels below. When the Queen ordered the royal guard to hold position and discipline the panicking districts by force, Elias turned his head slowly, as though he had just realized the word discipline had been used where mercy should have stood. He said, "Your Majesty, open the gates." Every noble turned toward him as if a servant had slapped a god. General Vost, commander of the Palace Shield Legions, bared his silver teeth and said, "Captain Ward, the lower city may already be compromised. Enemy infiltrators used refugee columns on Nerith, on Dulska, on Vale of Suns. The gates remain sealed until identity sweeps are complete." The Queen did not look at Elias at first. She kept her gaze fixed on the burning city and answered with royal calm, "Discipline preserves the living. Captain Panic kills faster than fire." Elias looked at the display, at a child carrying another child through ash, and said, "Fire is already killing them." And that was when the war changed shape. The palace shield had been built to protect the crown, not the people. It rose from 12 ancient reactors buried under the mountain. A golden dome so thick that enemy plasma broke against it like rain on glass. Inside the shield were royal gardens, barracks, granaries, and enough air for 80,000 nobles, officers, servants, and approved citizens. Outside were 6 million others, mechanics, vendors, school teachers, dockhands, refugees, old soldiers, priests, smugglers, mothers, engineers, children, and the nameless millions every empire called population until they needed taxes. The invaders, the core dominion, had struck at dawn with meteor shells and atmosphere knives. Slicing orbital defenses before the morning bells finished their first hymn, their strategy was brutal and simple. Burn the districts, drive survivors toward the palace, force the Queen to choose between security and compassion. Then send infiltrators among the desperate. The old manuals called this mercy bait, a phrase Elias hated the moment he heard it. But Emmanuel had never held a dying child. Queen Marin lifted one hand. "And every voice in the chamber died, Captain Ward," she said. "Earth was invited to advise on fleet movements, not royal emergency law. You will return to your post." Elias did not move. His eyes were gray, tired, and not afraid enough. "I am at my post, Your Majesty," the Queen finally turned, and the court saw something pass between them. Not romance, not friendship, not trust, but recognition, the hard recognition of two people who had seen power fail in different ways. Marin had inherited a throne surrounded by enemies. Elias had inherited a species that buried too many cities and called the graves lessons. Neither believed in easy mercy, but only one of them was still willing to let procedure speak louder than screams. Lord Chancellor Orith stepped forward, his robes glittering with emergency authority. "The captain forgets that human sentiment is not policy. Open those gates, and we invite collapse. The lower districts must be contained. Order must be restored. Examples must be made. Elias turned to him. Examples of what, Chancellor? How clean a palace looks when a city dies outside it. The Chancellor flushed violet. Guards reached for shock spears. General Vost smiled because he had wanted an excuse since Elias first refused to bow properly. Then the Western District vanished from the map. There was no explosion at first, only a sudden white emptiness where streets had been. Then the shock arrived, not as sound, but as pressure. Making every crystal in the throne room ring, the display recovered in fragments. Tower roots, vapor trails, blood-red weather, evacuation routes breaking into static. Core siege drill had punched through the old metro's spine and ignited the transit fuel beneath 60 blocks. Emergency algorithms updated the death estimate. 900,000 possible casualties. Rising, a noblewoman fainted. Nobody moved to catch her. Elias did not blink. He had gone very still in the way humans did before doing something unforgivable. Marin whispered. Hold formation, Elias said. No. A single word should not have carried across a throne room built for queens. But his did. It struck the command table. The glass floor, the sealed gates on the display, the bones beneath every old law. General Voist stepped forward, hand on his pistol. Captain, you will remember where you stand. Elias looked at him and said, I stand in a room full of people, deciding whether 6 million lives are an inconvenience. That is easy to remember. The general drew the pistol halfway, and every royal guard shifted. Then Captain Elias Ward did the most human thing in the galaxy. He ignored the gun and opened his cum. All Earth personnel, he said. This is Ward. Initiate disaster protocol. Arcline. Treat all civilians as recoverable until proven otherwise. Repeat, survivors first. The Queen's face went white, because Earth had not asked permission across Alira. 3 human relief ships broke diplomatic formation and dropped through burning clouds. They were not warships by Aurelian standards. Too ugly, too boxy, too slow for court admiration. But their hulls opened like iron cathedrals, releasing rescue drones, shield pods, medfoam carriers, oxygen balloons, bridge cables, water bombs, medical tents, and hundreds of soldiers in gray armor marked not with conquest symbols but red rescue bands. Human engineers landed on rooftops that were still melting. Human medics ran toward streets the royal grid had marked unrecoverable. Human pilots wedged evacuation barges between collapsing towers, and above it all, every public channel began receiving one message in 27 languages. This is Earth Relief Command. Move toward light beacons. Carry children, carry wounded. Leave belongings. You are not abandoned. The lower city heard them, and 6 million people stopped dying quietly. The palace command table erupted with alarms. Unauthorized deployment, shield breach risk, airspace violation, chain of command fracture. Chancellor Orith shouted that Earth had committed an act of aggression. General Voss demanded permission to detain Captain Ward. Half the nobles cried treason, the other half prayed louder. And Queen Marin stood silent, while the map of her capital filled with gray rescue icons moving through fire where gold royal icons remained behind walls. Her whole life she had been taught that discipline meant stillness, control, hierarchy, the ability to wait while others panicked. Yet the human rescue formations looked nothing like panic. They moved with terrifying order, cutting lanes through debris, marking safe roofs, triangulating trapped heat signatures, assigning medics by injury type, redirecting mobs away from broken bridges. Every act of mercy had a number. Every risk had a handler. Every impossible rescue had a backup plan. Elias said quietly, "That is discipline." Marin heard him, and hated that she did. Lord Orith slammed his fist onto the table. "Your Majesty, foreign soldiers are broadcasting over royal emergency channels. Civilians are following them instead of lawful command. If you do not restore authority now, the crown will look weak." Elias looked toward the burning western district and answered before the queen could. "Authority that needs children to die for its posture is already weak." Voss lifted his pistol fully then. and in one smooth motion, 3 human guards stationed at the diplomatic arch raised their rifles. Not aimed at the Queen, never at the Queen. Only at the general's hand. The throne room froze. The choir finally stopped singing for the first time in 800 years. Silence entered the moon hall without permission. Marin descended 1 step from the throne. "Captain Ward, order your personnel to stand down." Elias answered. "I cannot do that," she said. "Cannot. Or will not," he said, "both, Your Majesty." Earth's disaster law requires intervention when a host government is unable or unwilling to preserve civilian life during mass casualty events. The Chancellor laughed sharply. "Earth law has no force here," Elias nodded. "Correct?" "But Earth's conscience does," Vost snarled. Pretty words from a species that lost cities because it trusted walls. Elias turned so fast the general stopped smiling. "We lost cities because leaders waited for permission from dead systems. We do not do that anymore." There it was, the human wound beneath the uniform. The court had mocked Earth for years. Primitive survivors, sentimental engineers, a species that turned ruins into flags and trauma into policy. They had heard the stories: drowned coastlines, abandoned domes, cities locked out of their own shelters because commanders feared infiltrators. Earth had learned slowly, brutally, and with graves so numerous they became geography. Now every human child learned the first rule of disaster before mathematics. Count the living first, blame the dead later. Other powers called it emotional, dangerous, politically embarrassing. Yet human worlds had the highest survival rates in the spiral after catastrophes. Because when alarms rang, humans did not ask who deserved saving. They asked where the nearest ladder was. Then the core Dominion noticed enemy commanders had expected disorder. They had expected civilians to crush one another against palace walls, the Queen to seal herself behind honor law, and Earth to protest politely from orbit instead. Their thermal scans showed evacuation corridors forming, casualties being sorted, fires redirected, and panic converting into motion, so the core adapted. 3 black ships dropped from cloud cover and released hunter drones into the refugee lanes. Machines shaped like folded knives designed to target heat clusters and broadcast screams before impact. On the display, 1 swarm angled toward Beacon 7, where 40,000 civilians were crossing a cracked river bridge under human guidance. Elias saw it, so did Marin, for 1 heartbeat. Neither spoke, then Elias said, "Give me the east turret batteries," Voss laughed. "You think we would hand royal weapons to a foreign captain?" Elias said, "No, I think you will hand them to your queen." Marin stared at Beacon 7 at the hunter swarm descending. At a tiny icon labeled School Convoy, there were rules for this too. The east turrets were palace defensive assets, not to be used beyond shield boundary without unanimous command authorization. Except in the event of direct royal threat, the civilians outside were not a direct royal threat. They were not royal at all, but they were hers. That thought struck Marin harder than any explosion. She turned to the weapons master. "Unlock east batteries," Vost shouted. "Your Majesty," she said, "I did not ask for your fear. General, I gave an order." The command ring flashed gold. The palace batteries awakened, 12 towers unfolding from the shield line like spears of sunrise. Human targeting data poured in through forbidden channels. Cleaner, faster, more precise than the royal grid. Then the east sky filled with gold fire, hunter drones shattered over the river in burning rain, and 40,000 civilians looked up from the bridge to see the palace that had locked them out finally shoot for them. Sound rose from the lower city. Not cheering, not yet, something more dangerous. Hope made people move. Hope made strangers carry strangers. Hope made wounded men stand so children could ride stretchers. Hope made old women tear curtains into bandages and thieves, direct traffic and priests open vaults for medicine. Hope made the core timetable begin to fail, and failure made the enemy crueler. Orbital scans showed 6 Dominion cutters shifting toward the northern evacuation lane. Where human ships were lifting refugees in batches of 5,000, royal fighters remained docked under shield protocol, awaiting confirmed air superiority. Elias looked at Marin. Marin looked at Vost. Vost said, "We cannot risk the Crown Squadron," the Queen answered. "You mean we cannot risk pilots?" He stiffened. "The squadron is sworn to protect royal blood." Marin looked back to the map. "Then royal blood will protect them." She removed her coronet. Every noble gasped. Marin placed the black crown on the command table and said, "All squadrons launch. Civilian cover priority. Any officer who refuses may explain to the Ashes why he valued my head more than their children." The order traveled through the palace in gold script. Fighter bays opened. Pilots who had waited behind sealed doors ran to ships with tears on their faces. Not because they feared dying, but because they had feared never being allowed to matter. The first royal fighters burst through the shield and joined human rescue craft above the city. Sleek gold blades beside ugly gray bricks, beauty and stubbornness flying together through smoke. Captain Elias Ward smiled for the first time, only a little. Only because the living had gained another hour. The Corps Dominion commander, Marshal Keth, watched from orbit with growing irritation. He was a veteran of 20 compliance wars. A master of breaking monarchies by forcing them to choose between image and people. Royal cultures were predictable. Their palaces were cages polished from inside. Their rulers spoke of duty while defending marble. Their soldiers obeyed symbols long after strategy died, but humans ruined clean equations. One human rescue doctrine could infect an empire faster than rebellion. Because civilians who were saved by foreigners began asking why their own rulers had not moved first. Keth opened a channel to the palace, his plated face appearing above the command table. "Queen Marin Solvin, your city is collapsing because discipline failed. Withdraw your remaining forces behind the shield and surrender the outer districts. I will permit the palace to survive as administrative authority under Dominion supervision." Marin asked, "What happens to my people outside the shield?" Keth blinked. "Your productive citizens will be processed." The word processed moved through the throne room like poison gas. Marin said, "All citizens are productive when alive." Keth smiled. "Sentiment has already cost you order." Then Elias stepped into the transmission frame. "No, Marshal. Sentiment is why your plan is behind schedule." Keth's eyes narrowed. "Human?" Elias nodded. "Survivor," the channel cut. The next attack came without warning. Dominion siege drills erupted beneath the southern hospital district. Not to destroy buildings, but to fracture evacuation lanes. Entire avenues tilted. Rescue drones vanished into dust. And one of the human relief ships, the Mercy Jane, took a lance through its port engine while loaded with 8,000 civilians. It began to fall toward the palace shield. Too damaged to climb, too heavy to steer. The royal grid labeled it impact hazard. Automatic defense systems prepared to vaporize it before collision. Elias saw the firing solution appear and his voice cracked for the first time. "Do not shoot that ship," the weapons master shouted. "It will breach the shield," Elias said. "There are 8,000 people aboard." Vost said, "There are 80,000 inside." Marin looked at the falling ship. Its hull burning, its distress signal repeating. "This is Mercy Jane. Control failing. Passengers secured. Request corridor we cannot hold." The automatic countdown began. 10, 9, 8. The palace shield could open a small emergency gate, but only if someone overrode 7 safety locks. If the angle failed, the ship would crash into the royal gardens and kill thousands. 7. Elias ran to the command table. Vost blocked him. 6. Marin slammed her palm onto the royal seal. Authorization 1-5. Chancellor Orith screamed that she was murdering the court. Authorization 2-3-4. Elias shoved Vost aside and linked his own command codes. Unauthorized human tactical assist. 3, 2. The shield opened like an eyelid. Mercy Jane fell through fire for one impossible second. The whole city watched the burning rescue ship pass through the Golden Palace dome. It clipped the West Garden, tore through statues of dead kings, carved a trench across 7 ceremonial lawns, and came to rest against the Hall of Ancestors. Every window in the palace shattered inward. Nobles hit the floor. Alarms screamed. Smoke poured into sacred corridors, but the ship did not explode. Human crash foam burst from its belly in white rivers. Royal firefighters rushed forward, and the first hatch opened from inside. A little girl stumbled out, carrying a cracked school banner. Behind her came 8,000 living citizens. Not subjects, not statistics, citizens. Queen Marin walked through broken glass toward them before anyone could stop her. She had never stood among lower district children without 10 layers of ceremony between them. Never smelled their smoke, never heard them cough. A boy with blood on his forehead asked, "Why did you close the gates?" The court froze. Because no one spoke to a queen that way and survived socially. Sometimes literally, Marin looked at him. And every old answer turned to ash in her mouth. For your safety, for order. Because the enemy wanted panic, because I was afraid. Because law gave me permission to be cruel, none of it was enough. She knelt. The Moonhall cameras captured it from every angle. A queen of 8 centuries kneeling in broken glass before a child from the lower city, she said, "I was wrong." The palace changed more in those 3 words than in 300 reforms. Elias stood behind her. One hand pressed to his bleeding side where glass had cut through his coat. He did not smile this time, because apologies did not resurrect the Western District. And humility did not stop the Dominion fleet. But the living citizens pouring from Mercy Jane saw their queen kneel, and the royal soldiers saw it, and the servants saw it. And somewhere deep in the palace, old loyalty cracked open and became something stronger than obedience. It became choice. Then the Hall of Ancestors collapsed behind them. Dominion lances struck again. The shield flickered. The war entered the palace. Core assault pods slammed into the outer gardens. Black capsules drilling through soil and marble. Enemy infantry emerged in segmented armor. Firing stun nets and plasma hooks, their orders were obvious. Seize the queen, kill the human captain. Broadcast surrender from the throne. Royal guards formed defensive ranks around Marin. But the gardens were chaos. Civilians scattered, wounded screamed. Smoke swallowed command lines, and the old palace layout, designed for parades, became a trap. Elias pulled a rifle from a fallen guard and shouted, "Not to the throne room, to the kitchens." Marin stared at him. The kitchens. He pointed toward a service arch, thick walls, water access, dumbwaiter shafts, old delivery tunnels, large doors, no stained glass. Whoever built your palace accidentally made the servants smarter than your architects. A royal guard captain almost laughed. Then enemy fire cut through the statues where the nobles had been running. Nobody laughed after that. They moved through servant corridors while the palace shook. Queen, guards, civilians, medics, wounded pilots, kitchen staff, 2 terrified nobles, and Captain Ward dragging a supply cart full of children who could not walk. Behind them, corps soldiers breached the royal promenade, expecting symbols, finding only empty banners and trap doors. Elias directed guards with brutal calm. Seal that arch, flood that hall, cut gravity in the west gallery. Use steam lines, not plasma. Civilians behind us. Every order sounded improvised until it worked. The palace staff, ignored for generations, became the most important army in the building. Cooks knew which passages ran under the feast hall. Cleaners knew which vents bypassed security. Gardeners knew where old irrigation tanks could drown a corridor. And Queen Marin watched her empire survive through people her court called invisible. The dramatic truth was simple. A throne is only high because everyone beneath it agrees to hold the floor. In the old winter kitchen, they built a command center from butcher tables and copper pipes. Human medics treated nobles beside dock workers. Royal engineers ran cables through bread ovens. Children slept under flour sacks. And Marin stood at the center without crown or throne, receiving reports from people who would not have been allowed to address her that morning. An old cook named Sella told her that the north pantry tunnel could fit stretchers. A sewer mechanic named Tavi corrected the royal map and found a route to the shield reactors. A teenage courier from the lower city identified core signal jammers disguised as prayer drones. Each time Marin listened, the room grew bolder. Each time she obeyed good information from a low voice, her authority changed shape. Not smaller, but wider, Elias noticed. The queen was learning fast. That was good. Because the next hour would decide whether Illyria became a grave or a legend. The shield reactors were failing, not from bombardment, but sabotage. Core infiltrators had entered before the attack and planted pulse worms in the reactor conduits. The palace dome would collapse within 40 minutes, and when it fell, the Dominion fleet would have clear line of fire on every evacuation zone. General Vost, who had survived the crash and retreated with a loyal cluster of officers, demanded a counterassault to retake the throne room. Elias demanded a reactor rescue team. Chancellor Oreth demanded that the Queen transfer to the mountain vault and preserve continuity of government. Everyone spoke at once, until Marin slammed a kitchen cleaver into the table. "We are done preserving symbols while people die." The room went silent. Marin pointed to Tavi. "Can the shield be stabilized?" He swallowed. "Maybe. With manual conduit removal, but the reactor crawlways are flooded with radiation." "No drone survives that interference," Elias said. "Humans can." For a little while Marin turned on him. "No," he met her eyes. "Yes," she said. "You are already wounded," he said. "Everyone is wounded." "Pick useful ones," Tavi whispered, "even if we clear the worms. Someone must hold the bypass handles until the grid reboots. The temperature will cook armor seals." Elias nodded. "How long?" 9 minutes. "Human armor can handle 6, Marin said again. "No, but softer." Because now she understood what his calm meant. Elias was not fearless. He was already spending his life in his head. Marin stepped close enough that only he heard her. "Earth law does not require you to die for my city," Elias answered. "Earth memory does." She shook her head. "Memory is not command." He said, "No, but it is a debt. I was 10 when the Ankara domes opened too late. My mother carried strangers until her lungs burned. My father died holding a gate that should never have been closed. I spent 20 years learning one thing, Your Majesty. When the door opens, somebody has to stand in it." Marin looked away first. Not because she was queen, because she was human enough in that moment to hate the price of goodness. She assigned the mission with a voice made of iron and grief. Elias would lead a mixed team through servant tunnels to the reactor chamber. Royal engineers would guide them. Lower city mechanics would identify sabotage devices. Kitchen staff would keep evacuation routes clear. Guard Captain Rollin would defend the approach. Queen Marin herself would coordinate civilian extraction from the old winter kitchen. Vost objected at once, citing royal safety. Marin did not even look at him, General. "You may help save the city, or you may stand aside and be remembered accurately." That wounded him more than dismissal, because aristocrats feared truth more than death. The reactor team left through a flower cellar. No banners followed them, only the smell of smoke. Hot metal and bread, they crawled through tunnels carved long before the palace became beautiful. Old utility bones beneath royal marble. Elias at the front, 2 human engineers behind him. Then Tavi, 3 royal guards. A palace plumber named Oren, and Princess Archivist Lysa, the queen's younger cousin, who insisted she knew the ancient maintenance seals and threatened to bite anyone who tried to send her back. Dominion tremors shook dust from the ceiling. Once a blast collapsed the path ahead and forced them through a pipe slick with coolant. Once they passed under the throne room and heard core soldiers marching above, broadcasting promises that surrender would bring peace, Tavi muttered. "Peace sounds loud when liars sell it," Elias said. "That is because truth does not need speakers." In the kitchen command center, Marin listened to every channel. Her city was no longer a map, it was voices. Beacon 7 requesting water. Mercy Jane survivors moving children through pantry tunnel. Royal fighters low on fuel. Hospital barges asking for cover. Lower district volunteers clearing landing zones with construction lasers. Earth medics reporting childbirth in a subway station. Aurelian pilots laughing like madmen as they shielded rescue ships. Every voice wanted something. Permission, air, stretchers, coordinates, forgiveness. Marin gave what she could, and when she could not give enough, she stopped lying hold for 6 minutes, she told one trapped district. "I cannot reach you yet, but I will not forget you." The district captain answered. "We will hold because you said yet." That word became a weapon. Yet meant the story was not over. Marshal Keth tried to break that word. He hijacked civilian channels and showed images of ash streets and covered bodies. He said the Queen had abandoned them. Earth had provoked their deaths. Further resistance would only multiply suffering. For a moment, the evacuation lane slowed, grief pressing down harder than fire. Then Queen Marin opened every royal channel and stood before a kitchen wall blackened by smoke. No crown, no throne, no music. Citizens of Alira, she said, I closed the gates when you needed them open. That failure is mine, not yours. Earth moved before I did. And because of that, many of you live. I will not hide behind ceremony now. If you can walk, walk toward the beacons. If you can carry, carry someone smaller. If you can fight, fight for the person beside you. Not for my crown, not for my house, for the living future we have not yet earned. The city heard her apology. The city heard her order. And this time, they obeyed because they chose to. The evacuation lane surged again, stronger, smarter, angrier. A gang from the iron steps formed a human chain across a flooded underpass. Temple singers turned prayer amplifiers into direction speakers. Students hacked advertising boards to display safe routes. Royal tax collectors used their knowledge of addresses to check which apartment towers still had elderly residents. Prisoners from a half-collapsed detention block were released by a guard captain who told them, Save 10 people, and we discuss your sentence later. They saved hundreds. The city became a machine made from conscience. And the Dominion, which knew how to break armies, struggled to understand a population that had started acting like one. Beneath the palace, Elias reached the reactor chamber. It looked like a captured star. 12 columns of white fusion light plunged through a cathedral of steel, each surrounded by access bridges, coolant rivers, magnetic rings, and the black crawling shapes of core pulse worms attached to conduits like mechanical leeches. Radiation alarms shrieked inside every helmet. Lysa unlocked the first maintenance seal. Tavi identified the sabotage pattern. Human engineer Novak began cutting worms loose with a thermal blade. The first one exploded and threw a royal guard into the rail. Elias caught him by the armor strap before he fell into the light. Oren, the plumber, cursed so creatively that even the reactor seemed embarrassed. Then core infiltrators attacked from the lower gantry. 6 of them, cloaked in stolen servant uniforms. Firing needle rounds, the chamber became sparks. White light screams and metal thunder. Elias did not call for retreat. He called for survivors. Novak was hit first, suit punctured, blood floating in red beads inside his visor. Elias dragged him behind a conduit and slapped foam over the breach. Tavi shouted that the pulse worms were spreading. Raylan's guards held the gantry. Lysa crawled under a firing line to reach the second seal. Oren opened a steam purge that blasted 2 infiltrators off the bridge. Elias fired in controlled bursts while shouting instructions over the chaos. Nobody dies quietly. Talk to me, Novak. Count backward from 20. Tavi, mark live conduits. Lysa, keep your head down. Rollin left side, one by one. The worms came free, and one by one, the reactor stabilized. But the bypass handles still had to be held, 3 of them. On separate platforms inside the heat bloom, the mechanic had been right. No drone could survive. Maybe no person could either. Elias looked at the handles, then at the team, before he could speak. Guard Captain Rowland said, Do not insult us, human. This is our house too, Tavi said. I am from the lower city. I have been cooked by worse landlords, Lysa said. I am royal blood. Apparently that is useful for something. Elias wanted to argue. There was no time. He chose the hottest platform for himself. Because leadership still meant taking the worst part, when nobody was looking, they took their places above them. The shield began to fail in the winter kitchen. The lights dimmed, and the Dominion fleet appeared through the weakening dome, black ships hanging like verdicts. Chancellor Orith arrived with 2 officers and whispered that the continuity shuttle was ready. Your Majesty, the capital is lost. The dynasty must endure. Marin looked at children under tables. Cooks holding rifles, pilots bleeding through bandages, and lower city mothers staring. Then she said, The dynasty is not enduring if they are not. Orith's face hardened. Then forgive me. The two officers raised weapons, treason, like cowardice, often wears clean gloves before they could fire. General Vost shot them from behind. Armor cracked, face burned, pistol smoking. "I have been wrong all day," he said. "I prefer not to be wrong in the history books as well." He knocked Orith unconscious and bowed his head. "Your Majesty, Palace Guard awaits useful orders." No forgiveness yet, but a door had opened. In the reactor chamber, Elias gripped the bypass handle with both hands. Heat swallowed him instantly across the chamber. Rowland, Tavi, and Lysa held their stations beneath the light of the captured star. Elias counted seconds, not to survive, but to stay useful. Novak called grid percentages from behind a conduit. Dominion infiltrators made one last push. Rowland fired one-handed. Lysa shouted maintenance codes. Tavi sang through clenched teeth. Elias heard the static, gunfire, singing, and alarms, and thought, "Good. Noisy means alive at 6 minutes. Human armor limits ended." At 7 minutes, his vision narrowed. At 8 minutes, his father's voice returned. "When the door opens, son, stand in it at 9 minutes." The shield rebooted. Gold light exploded over Illyra. The palace dome strengthened, then expanded outward. Because Tavi had rerouted the grid through evacuation beacons, and Lysa had unlocked ancient festival settings meant for protecting parade crowds. The shield rolled across hospitals, bridges, landing zones, refugee columns, and the cracked river road, Dominion lances scattered against renewed gold. Earth rescue ships climbed with full holds. Royal fighters roared beneath the shield edge. And Marshal Keth's perfect assault became a siege against a city that refused to finish dying. Elias let go. He fell. Rowland caught him before he hit the platform. This time, an Aurelian held the human at the door. They dragged him back through smoke and radiation haze. Armor peeling away in blackened pieces, hands burned, breathing shallow. And when they reached the winter kitchen, the room went silent. Queen Marin crossed to him. Elias opened his eyes halfway and whispered, "Survivors." She looked at the reports flooding the walls. Millions moving, reactors stable, gates open. Civilians inside palace shelters, royal forces integrated with Earth Relief Command. She bent close and answered, "Survivors first." He closed his eyes. The city held its breath. Then the medic said, "He is alive." The cheer shook flour from the rafters. But victory had not arrived, only the chance to earn it. Commander Hannah Rios, Ilias's second, asked for every festival drone. Advertising mirror, civilian transmitter, an empty relief pod in the capital Vost blinked. "That sounds like madness," Rios answered. "Human disaster doctrine, sir." The plan spread like fire learning to heal. Drones rose with heat lamps, mirrors angled toward clouds. Smugglers launched junk ships. Temple bells pulsed interference. And empty rescue pods turned upward. 2 Dominion targeting Illyra no longer looked broken. It looked impossible to map. Precision failed when mercy lied better than fear. Marshal Keth's flagship descended, a black giant called the Doctrine of Peace. Its main cannon pressing white fire onto the golden shield. Keth opened one final channel. "Queen Marin, you cannot save everyone." Marin looked at Elias breathing beneath bandages, at Ren's sister with the cracked banner, at nobles and dockworkers together, and answered, "No ruler can save everyone, Marshal, but only a coward uses that truth as permission to save no one." The shield buckled. Elias woke and grabbed Rios's sleeve. "The flagship," he rasped. "Command spine, under the ventral ridge." Not with weapons, with survivors, Rios understood. Empty rescue pods, remote guidance, no pilots. Marin gave one order. Do it. Hundreds of empty rescue pods climbed through smoke. Dominion guns ignored them at first, classifying them as medical debris, then recalculated too late. The first wave burst into crash foam. Choking vents, the second followed with adhesive. The third scattered mirror foil. The fourth tangled weapon veins. It was ridiculous, desperate, and perfectly human. Aurelian cruisers fired into the exposed command spine, and the flagship split open above the eastern mountains. Marshal Keth's transmission returned for one flickering instant. What are you? He demanded. Marin answered, for the city's survivors. The rest of the Dominion fleet broke formation. By sunset, Illyria still burned in places, but it belonged to the living. The palace gates were gone, torn open by Mercy Jane's crash and dismantled by Marin's order so stretchers could pass more easily. The queen walked through ash without crown, writing names when recorders failed. She found the boy who had asked why she closed the gates. His name was Ren. His sister had survived. His father had not. Marin knelt again, not for cameras this time, and said, I will spend the rest of my reign answering you. Ren handed her a strip of cloth from his school banner. Keep the gates open, he said. She tied it around her wrist. I will. 3 days later, the throne room reopened. Not for celebration, but for accounting. The moon throne had been dragged aside for casualty boards. Queen Marin entered without coronet, followed by Captain Elias Ward in a hoverchair. Chancellor Orith stood in chains. Vost stood without rank pins until review. Sella the cook stood at the command table. Tavi stood beside the weapons master. Ren and his sister sat in the front row. Marin faced them all. Once she said, I believed discipline meant control. Silence, sealed gates, perfect obedience. Yesterday taught me that discipline without mercy is only fear with better posture. Captain Ward did not call for order when fire came. He called for survivors, and because of that call, we remembered what order is for from this day forward. No gate of Illyria shall be sealed against civilians during disaster. Number officer may prioritize royal property over civilian life. No district shall be called expendable while one person in it still breathes. The survivor edict is now crown law. And I place my reign beneath it, a noble asked. And if the law weakens the throne? Marin looked at the cracked walls, the crowded hall, the living citizens who had become witnesses. Then the throne deserves weakness. Nobody applauded at first. Then Ren's little sister clapped once. Then Sella, then Tavi, then the guards, then the pilots. Then the lower city survivors. The applause became a storm. Not for a queen who had been perfect, but for one who had been wrong and changed before the city finished dying. Months later, when Earth recalled Elias, Marin met him at the open gate, rebuilt without locks. She gave him a blackened piece of the old gate mechanism. Engraved in Aurelian, in English, survivors first. Elias closed his burned hand around it. My father would have liked this, Marin said. I would have liked to meet him. Elias looked at the road beyond the open gate. You did in a way every time someone held a door. Earth ships lifted by noon, gray holes rising through a sky still scarred but blue beneath the smoke. The people of Illyria did not kneel as they left. They stood, because rescue was not worship. An apology could become law if sharpened by action years later. When other worlds asked how Illyria survived the core dominion, historians argued over tactics. Shield mathematics and weaponized rescue pods, but in the lower city, where memorial walls carried names by the thousands. The story was simpler. The queen called for discipline. The human called for survivors, and between those two commands, a dying city learned which one made discipline worth having. Because order is not the silence of people obeying behind sealed gates. Order is the sound of millions moving toward life together, and the strongest throne in the galaxy was not the one guarded by walls. It was the one that finally opened its doors.